Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. My name is Thomas Vick, one of the co-hosts of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I'm joined by Seth Wilson, attorney Seth Wilson of Noblesville, Indiana. Seth, how are you today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. I'm excited to be back chatting with you and talking through some more law practice management and kind of starting your own law firm type discussion. So we are, in the midst of our practice progress, learning how to do this well and making sure that we're not overcommitting ourselves and under delivering and all of those fun things. And so we thought it'd be fun maybe just to take a step back and think back to the time when we actually kind of first started our practices. And the one thing that always I had the advantage of or disadvantage of, one way or the other, I guess, is I was part of an established firm. So I never kind of knew what did it take to have that first discussion and figure out how to start the firm. What do you do with that? And you had mentioned something a couple weeks ago on the domain name. So I thought, it all kind of starts with a name. So maybe we should talk about what that looks like. So tell me a little bit, if you will, about kind of how you ended up choosing your name to begin with. And I know you subsequently actually changed the name of the firm.
Yeah, so first starting out, from law school, I was just going to hang my own shingle. I didn't even have a shingle to hang at the beginning of it, didn't have an office space or anything like that. So I decided that I was going to be a sole proprietor. It seemed like, there were not as many procedural hurdles that you had to go through in order to be a sole proprietorship in Indiana. And so I decided that I was just going to call my practice the law office of Thomas A. Vick. And I really started to use that when I actually had a law office. In May 2015, that's when I moved into the building that I'm in right now. And so I think I could legitimately call it a law office. It's important that whatever you call it is accurate, right? You need to make sure that what you're describing to clients and prospective clients is actually truly what your practice is. And so I decided on the law office of Thomas A. Vick, and I got my letterhead, and my tagline was to do justice, love mercy, and to walk humbly. Got letterhead that said as much, and got my little, headshot on the letterhead. And, I was very proud of it. And the letterhead matched my card. And I was very, very proud of the pillars that Vistaprint put on there for me. But yeah, law office of Thomas A. Vick. It was simple, and I was the only person to do it. I was the bookkeeper, I was the marketing director, I was the accountant, I was the attorney, I was the receptionist, everything. And so that's what I went with, and thought that was a simple way of getting started.
Yeah, and I think that is just such a great overview of the options that you need to consider. Like, okay, there are lots of different entities that you could select, you could choose from. How do you know? Well, sometimes you end up in a situation where you don't get moving forward because you don't know what to do. And I thought that's why your story is so great, because you've later changed how you structure that. So tell me a little bit about that change.
Yeah, so as uh, as I was growing, I don't know if you can call it growing the first couple years, from 2015 to 2018, pretty big struggle. But once I hit 2018, 2019, then I started to get more consistent income, and I had a couple public defender contracts that kind of helped out with that to have some reliable income for the practice. But then it became a tax question, really. I saw that I was paying a lot of money in self employment taxes. And as an estate planning attorney who sometimes does business planning, I understand that there are tax benefits, deductions that you can take when you take a salary off of your revenue, rather than just paying self-employment taxes at 15.3% approximately, and then also paying income taxes on that. And so I decided that I was going to become an S Corp, which, I actually decided that I would be a professional corporation under Indiana law and then taxed as an S Corp. And there's a whole process that we could probably talk about, whether on the law office management side of Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast or on the estate planning, business planning type side. But I wanted to take a salary at the end of the day and get, not have to pay self-employment taxes. And in order to do that, I wanted to be taxed as an S corp. So you become a corporation of some kind or some kind of entity, and then you select an S corp status with the IRS. And so that's what I did, and it was pretty amazing the tax savings that I saw. And that's probably one of the big considerations that people need to make when they're starting out in deciding what entity. Again, we're doing both here right now, right? Business planning and law office management. You need to decide, how are you going to be taxed? Do you want to be taxed as a partnership? Do you want to be taxed as a C corp? I don't know why you would want to do that, or do you want to be taxed as an S corp? And so the S corp status was the best option for me. I was a sole proprietor before. I still didn't have any other employees, so it was still a simple transition at that point in time. And then I began to see the benefits once I had revenue from which I could draw a tax deduction from.
Yeah, and a couple of points there just to highlight. That is, you started out, you actually started generating some revenue, and then you started to see the impact of taxes on that revenue. And it kind of helps you understand, wait, maybe there is a different way to do that. But it is a bit of a process as well. You don't always have all the answers or all the information ahead of you right away. And keep in mind, these are Indiana rules that we're talking about in terms of how to set that up and what the requirements are. But in order to even figure out specifically what a law firm can be, there's certain entity types that you can be. You mentioned general or sole proprietor. You're kind of just on your own, and everything is you, and it's under your name, and any income that you receive and any expenses that you pay, you're going to pay tax on that because it's generated by a service to someone else in the legal context. It's not a product, it's a service, right? And so we're providing that. So you graduated, if you will, into that next analysis stage and then decided that a professional corporation, which happens to be one of the approved, if you will, entity types for a law firm in Indiana. And you can be a solo lawyer and have a professional corporation. You are a shareholder of that corporation and you own 100% of the shares. So that's another way to think about that. And then there, as you mentioned, kind of the benefits of the taxes on that is your salary that you're paid to run the business and provide services to your clients then employs you as an employee of that corporation. And you can also then, if you are profitable, you can take some of those profits out as shareholder distributions or draws, is kind of what everybody calls them, but they're technically a distribution on a share of stock.
Yeah. Yeah, the S corp status I think has a lot of benefit to it because you're able to take those distributions, and it can be, if you're just the sole owner of the entity, then you can kind of make those distributions from time to time. But if you're a partner, then you're going to be having these kinds of discussions with your partner, that you go into practice with, which is maybe a topic for another day of, do you want to go into law practice by yourself or do you want to go into law practice together with somebody? But if it's a discussion to be had. If you're going to be practicing with somebody, when are you going to be taking distributions? What kind of entity is it going to be, and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind on the salary part of the professional corporation is the IRS will utilize a rule of reasonableness. And so the idea being, if you are trying to take out just a little bit of salary and take everything in draws, so you don't have to pay taxes, quote unquote, on that, that's not going to work. You gotta balance it out and make sure that, okay, you're an attorney, your salary is sort of a reasonable amount of your revenue. the distributions are going to be some reasonable amount thereof as well. And there are some tax benefits to think through with that. And so as you go through that process, it is helpful to have an accountant help you do those calculations if you want to really see kind of where that break even point is and what sort of distribution process you're going to put in place makes sense as you're thinking about those compensation things. And oh, go ahead. You had something.
Yeah, and I was going to kind of lead into another topic of, what is the process of a law firm, kind of getting registered with the Indiana Board of Law Examiners, because kind of like when you first become an attorney, you got right before you become an attorney and sit for the bar, you got to submit all of these applications and, get, well, with applying for the bar, you got to get recommendation letters and all that kind of stuff. It's not nearly as rigorous, but there is some filing requirements that need to be complied with if you're going to practice as an entity in the state of Indiana. And I thought we would kind of go through those steps, so at least generally, over this podcast.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going. It's kind of funny you and I were thinking that way because you kind of start at the beginning where you applied to be a lawyer, you go back and apply to be a law firm. And so the Indiana's version of this is the Indiana Supreme Court Board of Law Examiners. And we've shared that on the screen. I'm not sure if it's large enough for everyone to see, but you can find that website and they have a page dedicated to the law office and how you would apply to register a new law office. And it gives you the types of entities, PC, LLC, or LLP. As an office, you can renew your existing, add or remove attorneys, and those kind of things. So there's a lot of helpful information right there and instructions for you. So if you walk through those instructions, the site is going to ask you to register and you'll have to walk through the entity thing. So you kind of want to use that as a checklist to see what you need to have done. And then obviously, then you're also going to need to actually form the entity with the Indiana Secretary of State or the Secretary of State in the state where you are practicing and get the formal corporate entity set together and then register that with the Board of Law Examiners. And this is not like something that's super obvious. In fact, I know there's a lot of times that people kind of forget this step even exists and that you need to do that. So I've had to remind myself several times over the years when people have, come and gone from our office that, oh, I need to make sure that we've either updated them or removed them from our registration here at the Board of Law Examiners.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is not only go to this website, Indiana Supreme Court Board of Law Examiners, but also read Indiana Rule of Admission and Discipline 27. And that just lays out exactly what needs to happen. It's very helpful, and it's pretty clear what if you're an attorney, you can figure it out. You can figure it out. So you go in there, you get a login for your own firm, and then in there you'll have to submit some documentation. It might be, your articles of organization and, your malpractice insurance, I think, is one of them as well. And but you just walk through the steps within that website and you'll be able to comply with Rule 27.
Yeah, and again, one thing I've found in life, and I'm sure you have as well, is there's a form for almost everything. And so if you can take the instructions and sort of turn that into your checklist of what you need to do, you'll have the basic information that's necessary. Another great resource for that is a malpractice application. If you haven't ever done the process of applying for malpractice insurance before, going through the checklist and the application will actually help you understand what the practice of law is and what's important to track from a data perspective later on, because you'll need to disclose that kind of information to the provider to ensure that coverage is adequate and appropriate for your practice. So these forms can really help you crystallize your thinking, also give you sort of a, here's my to-do list. I need to fill these things out, and or decision list that I need to make these decisions. One of the biggest challenges is, how do you figure out what the name of the firm is going to be, right? And I venture to say that you may not get it right the first time, but you do need to get started, because a lot of times you'll have several iterations of that name as your practice grows and develops, as you grow and develop as a person and as a lawyer. You may not know, what you started with may not be where you end up.
Yeah, and I'll kind of come back to where I was. 2019 is when I became Vick Law PC and became PC taxed as an S corp. And Vick Law just seemed to flow. It was short and simple. For some reason, people think that my first name is Vick, though. So you might think about what impression you're giving. Some people think I need to talk to Vick, and they're calling me by my first name, but it's my last name. So that's kind of fun. Also, there was a Northwestern basketball player a few years ago named Vick Law, and I haven't gotten him on the podcast yet, but I feel like I need to. So, that would be a great endorsement, I think. If I could get him to be, take one of my endorsements. That's important. And, you know, along with that, what kind of logo are you going to have? I kind of talked about, I just had, a navy blue picture with some pillars from Vistaprint that looked really law. It looked, man, this guy's a lawyer. Wow. At the very beginning in 2015. And then I had a friend that designed a red V for me as a logo. And I used that for many, many years. And then I just within the last year got a new logo, and I feel like this logo is the one that fits. It's got a gold shield and then a tree in the middle of the shield, and it's got roots going down, and the tree's navy blue, and it looks real nice. And it's kind of amazing that logo right there really actually makes me more mission minded about more purposeful in my practice, and have more pride in my practice, actually, because it just seems so meaningful. And that's kind of the fun stuff of owning your own business, right? You get to design these things, and I think it really captures what we're trying to do in the law office. So, as you're starting out thinking about your name, you got to also think about your logo, what's going to be your motto, all those kinds of things kind of go into the marketing alongside of the entity formation.
Yeah, but I think that's such an important point, Thomas, is because there's so many things to think about logistically. So don't lose track of the most important thing, which is, why are you here? What are you trying to accomplish with your practice? And who are the clients that you're going to serve, and how? And if you can give yourself some visual representation of what that is each and every day, it keeps the perspective when all of the stressors of a law practice come to bear. You mentioned wearing so many different hats, especially when you're starting out, of, I'm doing all the things, and you can lose sight of the root. Why am I doing this? And so that's a good thing. And you can take some pride in that, and take some pride in the profession that you are able to serve your community well and through. And I know lawyers, there's all kinds of lawyer jokes out there, and some of them are probably well earned. But for the most part, I think the people that I've had the fortune of practicing with, and the colleagues I practice with, I'm like, where's the bad lawyer? That's not been my experience. And so I feel fortunate, especially in Indiana, where we do have a really good place to practice. And I'm proud of that profession and happy to be a part of it. But also, what's my role within that? How do I do the things that I do every single day. And so those logos take on much more importance than just marketing, if you will. It's a representation of what I want my practice to be like. And it's aspirational. We don't always hit it, but we are trying to strive for that every single day.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And for me, having this new logo, it kind of brings more meaning to what I've done in the past. It's like this is what I've been doing, but it just hits the spot, and on a daily basis you see that, and you're reminded of the mission. You are, with estate planning, you're putting down roots, and this is going to be a foundation for your family now while you're living, but also in the next generation. And that tree is going to be there, and I hope Vic Law PC is going to be there too, right? To that extent, you want Vic Law to be there for a long time as well. And I know that you feel the same way about Adler attorneys.
Yeah, and we can talk through, the specifics of our practices and how we got to where we got to in terms of the back end and that kind of stuff. And that, that's why this is so much fun to have this conversation every week, because it just brings up new ideas of things that, we sort of take for granted because we've gone through them and we may have wrestled with them, or we may wrestle with them again, just not right now. And thinking through how we did that. But really today was, how do you get started with that? Because that entity selection piece is really important to think through. And you may not be a business lawyer, and that may not be your thing to figure all of that out. So make sure you get some advice from an accountant in terms of the tax implications. You passed a bar exam with other people who may be business lawyers. So reach out to them and get some input from what their thoughts are. Read through in Indiana, the Board of Law Examiners website. That'll point you back to the admission and discipline rule that applies to make sure that you are complying with all of the marketing pieces, because how you hold yourself out there. But just get started. And that's really that next step, because you will likely change and grow. And Thomas, I thought that was a really neat thing that you were able to sort of take the new to encapsulate what got you to this point. And now every time you see that, you think of the growth that has happened. And that's pretty cool. That's
Yep.
pretty cool.
Every year you're going to learn something new, something important that you didn't know the year before, and it's going to help your practice even more. And that's what I was telling my staff earlier today. You just learn something, probably more than one thing, every year, and it's just going to add more and more to your practice, and you're going to be a better attorney, better business owner because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And staying humble to learn and being willing to admit mistakes when appropriate, and, just moving forward and keep things going, and keep your head up in the midst of all the craziness that sometimes is the law of practice, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, Thomas, if folks want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
The best way to get in touch with me is by going to viclaw.org and book a call. viclaw.org and book a call. How about you, Seth?
We are available on the web at adlerattorneys.com. And if you want to visit that website, that'll give you our contact information, and you can reach out to us that way or give us a call from the website, Adler Attorneys.
Well, that will do it for today's episode. Seth, we'll talk to you later. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Thomas.